Columbus Invitational Champion Max McVety on red-green Valakut against Tom Genzman and Infect. So these players will be starting it up. Both players starting off at 1-0. And we will begin round number 2 here from Minneapolis right now. Looks like Tom is going to be on the play. He'll be sacrificing a Verdant Catacombs, going down to at least 19. We'll see if he wants to go down to 17 or not. Maybe search up the old breeding pool here. He'll go with this, just a basic forest, down to 19. Noble Hierarch, kick it over McVety's way.
So I agree with your assessment that Infect is favored in this matchup, but the die roll is a huge deal as well. So I think Genzman is definitely a favorite to get this match.
Hey, wooded foothills here from Max. We'll search up a stomping ground. Going to fall down to 17 very quickly. Now remember, McVety is our Columbus Invitational champion. So we're going to see him at the Players' Championship at the end of the year. Pretty cool stuff. He'll suspend a search for tomorrow. And we'll head back Genzman's way.
Plus, we've already got his new token, the Clue, to debut last round, thanks to Steve Rubin.
Absolutely.
His Thraben Inspectors.
Didn't expect that. I don't know how many clues I expect to see in Modern, but that was pretty sweet. There's an Inkmoth Nexus, so if Max didn't know what Tom was up to, he knows now. Ah, yes, regular damage beatdowns. One of my favorites from the Infect deck.
A little early to be going into that mode, but a free point's a free point.
We'll head back Max's way. See what he can put together for his second turn of the game. He's got a mountain. Does he have something like a Farseek here? Maybe a Sakura Tri-Belder. He'll actually go with the Tri-Belder.
You can see some hesitation here from McVety. He knows that he's putting the shields down right now. If Genzman's got the kill, nothing McVety can do about it. McVety could have potentially kept up appearances here by leaving up a red mana to at least represent Lightning Bolt, but he's also got to develop his board. And a turn 3 kill from this spot is pretty unlikely, so McVety just hoping he gets untapped.
Genzman will play a land. It's a Verdant Catacombs. That's land number 3. Let's see if Tom does have the victory here just yet. With the way that he's kind of moving through this turn, I don't think so. A little bit slowly here.
But for those of you relatively new to Modern, not impossible for Genzman to have the kill from here. You have Noble Hierarch plus your Nexus. That's 2. And this deck has a variety of +4 effects for 1 mana, so you can get to 10.
Now, speaking of which, here is 1. It's a Might of Old Crota. So it looks like it's going to be an attack for 6 Infect. Now 6 is not 10, but it's pretty gosh darn close. So Tom's got 4 Infect left to go to take care of Max. But fortunately for Max, he's going to get to take another turn this game. And there is the Infect counter when Tom Ross won his Invitational many moons ago.
And McVety here is representing the potential to get to Primeval Titan attacking this coming turn. Sakura Tri-Belder gets sacrificed. That's land number 3. Search for Tomorrow comes off suspend. That's land number 4. Get a land for your turn. Now you have Through the Breach.
Yep. He does have 4 copies of Through the Breach in the deck and also 4 copies of Primeval Titan. So now Max, do a little bit of shortcutting here. Going to resolve Search Tomorrow as well. So he'll untap, resolve Search Tomorrow on his upkeep. See what land he wants to search up here. He'll go with another white-bordered mountain, Patrick.
The Joe Lissette school.
Yeah. This is difficult to watch here.
Mismatched art pieces, too.
Yep. I know he's young.
Yep. This is this should be beneath us.
Yep. Especially he just won Invitational. Can actually afford the nice mountains now. Yet here we are.
Or at least all mountains with the same art.
Yep, that's true as well. Max does have another copy of Search Tomorrow in hand. He does have Through the Breach as well. It's just a question of does he have all the pieces to do something absurd this turn.
Given that McVety likely dies next turn, or there's at least a decent chance, I'm sure he's not playing around something like Spell Pierce. If he has the kill or a way to advance his board, he would go for it.
It's an Oath of Nissa.
Green Ponder, your favorite analogy.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. See what he found. A Primeval Titan.
Yep.
Better than a Ponder. Demonic Tutor for Primeval Titan.
Sometimes.
Yes, sort of. See what else Max can put together this turn. Again, he hasn't played a land just yet. And I do think he's trying to keep up appearances as best he can. And that might be the reason why he was so slow to play a land, is that his land enters the battlefield tapped. It's a copy of Valakut, the Molten Pinnacle.
So you can see some of the awkwardness here with the new way that this Valakut deck is built. McVety has to tutor up a bunch of mountains to be able to get his Primeval Titan kill going, because he can't just scape ship for a bunch of lands and kill in one shot. That means that he has issues with his colored mana situation because he has multiple green cards in his hand, but only one green source of mana.
Now, this is a very different. I just keep on calling. I want to keep calling it Scapeshift, but it's not Scapeshift.
Yep.
It's a Valakut deck, but it has no Scapeshifts. It has no Prismatic Omens. Now, apparently, from what I've been told by Nick Miller, our sideboard coordinator, Max McVety and Matthias Hunt actually kind of working on this deck together. And we know Matthias loves his Scapeshift and Primeval Titan decks, so here comes Inkmoth Nexus. It's only coming across for 2 if you're Max. That's got to be a sigh of relief. I'm not dead yet.
Yeah, at least one more turn. That's a huge deal here.
Yep. Up to 8 Infect. 2 to go here for Genzman. Does Tom have a decent follow-up here? He does not look thrilled. Taking a look at the body language. Got quite a few cards in hand. We know there's an Apostle's Blessing in hand, so he can defend a little bit here, but not a lot going on for the Infect player.
So the question is, what could be the leftovers here? I think that if Genzman had pump spells, especially with Apostle's Blessing in hand, he would simply go for the kill. 2 copies of Dismember, 2 copies of Spell Pierce, and then the 2 copies of Apostle's Blessing. Likely some mixture of those cards are in his hand right now.
Well, Spell Pierce is good right now, if that's the case.
He would definitely take a Spell Pierce.
Yeah. McVety will untap. He'll draw again. 8 Infect for him. 5 lands on the battlefield, 3 mountains, a Stomping Ground, and a Valakut. But now this is his big turn. Or at least it better be his big turn. And he'll try it through the breach. We'll see if Genzman actually does have that Spell Pierce here or not. Now he wants to take a look through the breach, and we can do the same. 5 mana, Instant Arcane. Put a creature card from your hand into play. That creature has haste. Sacrifice that creature at the end of turn. Whenever you're casting this card, you're not trying to do anything particularly fair. That's for sure.
And some of the list of Valakut I've seen floating around that have taken this sort of tact also play Emrakul as another easy way to win the game with Through the Breach.
Now, Through the Breach is resolving, so no Spell Pierce over there for Genzman. Here's Primeval Titan, which means we're going to have a trigger. So Primeval Titan's looking to search up 2 lands. I think Tom realizes he's in a little bit of trouble right now.
Or at least could be.
Yep.
I mean, fortunately, it's not Emrakul. That would just be game over.
Well, that'd be game over,
Yeah.
yeah. Looks like Max might be thinking Valakut plus Stomping Ground. Those are the cards he's kind of shuffling back and forth here. The Stomping Ground would give him Mountain number 5 for the Valakut. Wouldn't be a point of damage. It wouldn't be any damage just yet. Yeah, so there's Mountain number 5 and Stomping Ground, another Valakut. So the thought process here is when I attack, I'm going to deal you a boatload.
Yes. Because all the triggers happen simultaneously. So you can get your Valakuts and correct threshold of mountains all set up and get all the triggers. When they're coming from something like Primeval Titan where all the lands are entering the battlefield at the same time.
So that Primeval Titan trigger has resolved. Now, I think we're going to see Primeval Titan come into the red zone here.
I don't know. I think Genzman might be sitting on 2 Dismembers here.
Maybe we won't see it attacking. And it would make sense that he's sitting on at least 1, maybe 2, just because he hasn't done anything.
It would have been, most of his hands should be able to kill last turn. So he's got to be sitting on some of the more situational cards in his deck if he wasn't able to go for it. We know he doesn't have Spell Pierce. I think I saw at least 1 Dismember. If he has 2 here, this is fairly straightforward.
Now, one of the cards he does actually have in his hand as well, in addition to the Dismembers we believe are there and Apostle's Blessing and all that stuff, is he actually has some Glistener Elves in hand. So, and part of the reason he's not casting those is, right now he's not entirely sure what he's up against. You could see Pyroclasm, Fire Spout, all that stuff. So there's no real reason to deploy any more of those threats when you have Inkmoth Nexus.
And if he's got 2 copies of Dismember in his hand, then he gets really paid off for this line of play because he's able to take care of the Primeval Titan before McVety's able to get into combat.
There's a basic forest for Tom. He's going to fall down to 18. And it may have actually been Genzman's lack of aggression this game by not playing more of those Infect creatures that might actually win him this one. And you do have a decent idea what you're up against when you see your opponent suspend a Search for Tomorrow on turn 1. And Stomping Ground's involved in all of that stuff because not a lot of decks do that in Modern. Really only 1 in Scapeshift. But again, this is not a Scapeshift deck. It's a different kind of Valakut deck.
You can know that the kill ultimately is Valakut plus the mountains and really not know what's in McVety's list. This deck looks a lot different than the Scape Shift builds we've seen over the last couple of years.
2 dismembers here. That's 8 life that Tom has to pay to take care of that Primeval Titan. But I'd pay 8 life not to die. Now here's a Bloodstained Mire. And pass the turn back. Tricky there by Max. Now Tom wants to take a look at Valakut. See exactly what's going on. And you see when a mountain enters the battlefield, if you control at least 5 other mountains, which Max does, you can deal 3 damage to something. Now Apostle's Blessing I think is the card in question here. So we can take a look at that as well, because that's exactly what Tom is trying to secretly do right now in his hand. Doesn't want to tip his hand that that's what he's looking at. But you see, Apostle's Blessing, target artifact or creature you control gains protection from artifacts or from the color of your choice. However, Valakut and the damage that it deals, it has no color.
It is colorless, but not artifact. The Eldrazi distinction. And you can see with Summoner's Pact in hand, McVety is threatening to be able to just go get another Primeval Titan, get 2 more Enters the Battlefield triggers, and kill Genzman fairly easily.
So Valakut plus Mountain's playing a huge role here because Inkmoth Nexus can just be shot down out of the sky when Bloodstained Mire does search up a mountain, be it a basic mountain or a stomping ground. Inkmoth Nexus will get fired up here. Perhaps Tom is hoping that Max will miss this. I think that's really the only chance he's got.
But I don't think Genzman's hand can play back here. I think it's just Apostle's Blessing and 2 Glistener Elves and a Blighted Agent.
Not a lot going on for him. So Genzman's going to have to get in the red zone here at some point. Hands are kind of forced here on both sides. Tom's got to try to go for an attack, and Max has to sacrifice the Bloodstained Mire. So the activation of Inkmoth Nexus resolves. Here it comes. There will be an Exalted trigger on the stack, of course. And McVety will sacrifice that Bloodstained Mire. He'll search up a Cinderglade, and there will be 2 triggers here with Valakut. And it looks like they're both going to go after the Inkmoth Nexus. So Inkmoth Nexus down. And as you said, there's not a lot of places now for Tom to go.
Yep. And if he puts the shields down and just casts the creatures in his hand, well, now McVety knows the Summoner's Pact is good. No fear of getting countered out.
Just a couple Glistener Elves. Now, Secure Tribe-Elder was the draw. And I think he might have the ability to actually just cast Search Tomorrow and Secure Tribe-Elder, search up mountains and get it done that way, instead of having to take maybe the risk with the Summoner's Pact. And 2 Search Tomorrows will work just fine as well. Searching up mountains, a lot of triggers, and that'll get the job done. So Max McVety is going to win game number 1 here over Tom Genzman. Red-green Valakut up a game over Infect, which is a bit of a surprise, especially given that Infect was on the play that game.
Yeah, Genzman's hand was really light on pump. I think we only saw 1 pump spell over the course of the game. He slow rolled some of his threats there, I think, out of just some uncertainty about what he was playing against, and that gave McVety the cushion necessary to just barely stabilize the game and turn it around and kill Genzman in 1 turn.
To the sideboards we will go. We will start with Tom Genzman, who will be on the play here for game number 2, and you've got 3 Nature's Claim, 2 Dispel, 2 Kitchen Finks, and a whole bunch of 1-ofs in Twisted Image, Viridian Corruptor, Wild Defiance, Relic of Progenitus, a Spellskite, a Wall of Roots, a Pulse of Marasa, and a Carrying Call.
I got to be honest, I'm interested in almost none of this. I think the extra copy of Spellskite and the Wild Defiance are both acceptable, but nothing really Nature's Claim. Not a matchup for Kitchen Finks. Most of what McVety's doing is off of sorceries and creatures, so Dispel doesn't line up, and the rest of these cards are more for attrition matchups. So I don't think Genzman has a whole lot here to bring in.
Well, Dispel's not the worst, right? Because you did see Summoner's Pact, and you also saw Through the Breach.
Sure.
So
yeah, okay.
It's okay. I mean, I'm not excited about it.
You can't fight over the mana, but you can fight over Through the Breach. That's probably good enough to justify bringing in, though. With 2 copies of Spell Pierce already in the deck, just how many counter spells? Like, once you're in the spot where you're cutting pump spells, you're probably going overboard. But if Genzman wants to bail on the 2 copies of Dismember and maybe some of the Apostle Blessing, then there might be room for Dispel.
On the other side of things here from Max, he's got a Relic of Progenitus, 2 Grafdigger's Cage, a Reclamation Sage, 2 Crumble to Dust, 3 Anger of the Gods, 3 Opposite on Baloth, and 3 Spellskites. I guess Spellskite probably the most obvious of the bunch.
I think Spellskite and Anger of the Gods, they pair very well together, obviously. Spellskite lives through Anger of the Gods. Anger of the Gods is not necessarily lights out against Genzman because of the creature lands and his various pump effects, but still more than good enough to bring in here.
Well, that gives you an idea what both players are working with here. Tom Genzman will be on the play for game number 2. So while these players shuffle up and get ready for that game, we will very quickly talk about Max McVety and that clue token that he won for winning that Columbus Invitational just a couple weeks ago. Now, he also did win $10,000, an invite to Pro Tour Eldritch Moon, and an invite to our Players' Championship at the end of the year. But what people love about winning Invitational is getting your likeness on a card, and this clue token, pretty sweet, my man.
Yeah, and this was, I think, the first real no-brainer in Invitational win history. No question that someone was going to select the clue token, and fortunately for Max, it's him.
A lot of different ways to go about getting this, and actually we are unveiling this particular weekend. So all open participants this weekend will get the clue token. All classic participants tomorrow for our Legacy and Legacy and Standard Classics. And all orders from StarCityGames.com beginning May 13th at noon East Coast time. $5 minimum order, of course. Get yourself a Max McVety clue token because you're going to need them, given what we saw in Shadows over Innistrad.
And this is going to be good all through Season 2. If you can't make it out of the tour, you can just place an order on Star City Games website, $5 or more, and you can get this token.
So congratulations again to our Columbus Invitational champion and the player we're watching right now in the feature match area, Max McVety, on becoming a clue token as he shuffles up here for game number 2. Now, one of my favorite things about the SG Tour is that it's a great place, for players to make a name for themselves. Didn't know who Max McVety was before the Columbus Invitational, but now we're watching him play based off of that win. And if you watch that Columbus Invitational over those handful of rounds, no fluke there. Pretty good Magic player.
It's pretty hard to fluke your way into an Invitational win. There's so many rounds across multiple formats. The top 8 is 3 out of 5. That's another thing that flattens out variance. So McVety definitely earned it. No one just backdoors their way into winning an Invitational.
As I mentioned, he did win that Invitational, so he's going to the Players' Championship. He's going to be joined by some other players as well. You see those who got the job done in Season 1. Max in the middle. But you got Jeff Hoagland, Jerry Thompson, Andrew Tenjum. They earned their right to go to the Players' Championship at the end of the year. And then Jim Davis, our 2015 Players' Champion, will be at the Players' Championship as well. We get to fill this thing in over the course of the year. So Season 2, Season 3, and then some at-large bids from our overall Player of the Year race. We'll fill it out, and then we'll bring you all the action from the Star City Game Center in Roanoke, Virginia, December 17th and the 18th. Looking forward to that tournament.
I am too. Noticeably absent from those 5 players right now that are already qualified. Joe Lissette, who looked like he was going to get one of the Season 1 invites, got trumped at the Invitational by Jerry Thompson. Currently in first place in 2016 standings, though.
Yep. Now, one of the things about Joe, and obviously that was a disappointing weekend for him. I talked to him quite a bit at the conclusion of that weekend. You're going to see some ups and downs with the new structure of the SCG Tour, and he's like, maybe I'm going to take a break, but I don't know if anyone said more they're going to take a break than Joe. He loves the game. He's out here doing battle, and you have to imagine the Tron deck.
I believe so.
Yet again.
I think one of the changes you're going to see is players working with a lot more certainty this year. Last year, with all of the IQ points floating around, you never really were sure where you were at in the relative standings. You never knew if you were going to get jumped, even if you had a good weekend playing in one of the Opens or one of the Classics. But now I think players can predict much more reliably where they're going to be in the relative standings, and if they want to shut it down for a little while, they can pick it back up in Season 3, try to make a run then.
Everybody can use a break.
I think Joe was banking on Season 1, though. I shouldn't say banking. I think he's still going to make a lot of effort to qualify. But I think he thought, I would guess that he was in very good shape going into Columbus. But Jerry just had a great weekend.
Especially with a 5-0 start.
Yes.
Yeah, it's hard not to count your invite there, but didn't quite get the job done, unfortunately. But I agree with you. I think we'll see him at the Players' Championship at the end of the year for the 3rd year in a row. As a stomping ground enters the battlefield untapped there for Max McVety. Down to 18 he goes, but a Lightning Bolt's going to try to take care of this Noble Hierarch, and it'll get the job done. Now, there's always this weird question against Infect, right? Am I supposed to Lightning Bolt the Noble Hierarch, or do I try to pick a fight over the Infect creature that you have?
If McVety is going to be tapping out for the next couple turns, I think it makes sense to go for it. Or if he thinks he just doesn't have the tools to win the fight over the stack. If you only have a little bit of removal in your deck, usually the Infect deck can play over the top with counter spells and pump spells. There's also the chance that Genzman just doesn't have blue mana other than the Noble Hierarch, and he's playing towards Blighted Agent. So there's a variety of reasons to bolt the Hierarch. Could be just mana considerations, and factoring in the fact that Genzman may not be able to cast his follow-up play if the Hierarch's off the table.
A Farseek here from McVety. He's going to try to resolve that. And Genzman might have a Spell Pierce here for that, however. Remember, he does have a couple copies of that card in his main deck, and most Infect decks that you do see in Modern have a little bit of counter magic in them to defend their creatures or be able to stop a relevant spell over the course of a game. So it looks like Genzman's going to sacrifice Misty Rainforest. We'll see again if it's going to be Basic Island as opposed to Breeding Pool, but I think we're going to see a Spell Pierce here in just a moment as he does search up a Breeding Pool. Now, one of the things to note as well is when you're playing against a deck that has Valakut in it and kind of shoots you for 3, you kind of want to keep your life total in a certain area,
Well,
if you can.
In the old Scape Shift builds, keeping yourself above 18 was the magic number.
Yeah.
Because the deck deals damage in multiples of 3 because of Valakut, and usually when it's Scape Shift at the bare minimum was dealing 18 damage. So every time you go down into a multiple of 3, it makes it easier and easier for the Valakut player to kill you. At a certain point, it doesn't matter. They're going to kill you no matter what. But if you can preserve your life total, it is helpful.
A Wild Defiance here from Genzman. Now, this is a very powerful card against a deck that has targeted removal. Whenever a creature you control becomes a target of an instant or sorcery spell, that creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Note that does not stop Valakut, much like we saw with Apostle's Blessing last game. So Valakut is kind of the key, I would say, for Max in taking care of infect creatures.
And remember, Wild Defiance doesn't say by opponents. You can also, when it's also targeting your own stuff.
Yep.
So if Genzman has to shave out pump spells to make room for enough counter spells to interact, this is a way of still having enough effective pump in the deck to win.
You saw Farseek search up a mountain, and now here's a Cinderglade. And we'll head back over Genzman's way. Now, it would not surprise you as there's a breeding pool entering the battlefield untapped to see Genzman just go for broke here.
Well, it's very hard for McVety to play over the top with Wild Defiance in play.
Here's an activation of the Inkmoth Nexus. Genzman will serve in for at least one infect. Is he willing to make a move here? He will pay 2 life to cast the Mutagenic Growth, so it'll get +2/+2. But first, that Inkmoth Nexus will get +3/+3 because of Wild Defiance, so that's going to be an attack for 6. And now, this is a Vine to the Vastwood. Even more pumping to be done. And that appears to get the job done. So Tom Genzman will tie things up here against Max McVety. Infect, Red-Green Valakut going to game number 3. That looks a little bit more par for the course for the Infect deck in this matchup.
And this is the problem that McVety's going to have in the matchup. He spends the first 3 or 4 turns kind of just setting up. Doesn't have a lot of removal. Does not have a lot of instant speed. And Infect's best draws are very good against decks that are set up that way.
And to answer that Lightning Bolt question I kind of posed earlier in the game, well, Lightning Bolt would have been no good no matter what there because of the Wild Defiance.
Yeah, if McVety doesn't bolt there, then Genzman goes turn 2 Wild Defiance, and now what's your Lightning Bolt doing?
Yeah, absolutely nothing. So, you take a look at the sideboard there for Max, and, you're looking for, a card that just kills an artifact, like an Ancient Grudge, a Destructive Revel, or something like that that doesn't involve damage. You have to get a little bit unique, I guess, with Crumble to Dust to take care of Inkmoth Nexus. I don't know if you want to go that deep, though.
That card seems just so mopey to me. McVety has to keep a critical mass of mana and ways to find Primeval Titan in his deck. His deck is already not that well set up to sideboard in a bunch of cards because the infrastructure of the deck requires a lot of cards. So I don't think you can go to the really narrow stuff. I think the Spellskites and the Anger of the Gods are about as deep as you can go.
Well, we'll see exactly what Max wants to do for game number 3. He'll be on the plate for that game, but we've talked about it many times, and we will if we see him more this week, and that he did win our Columbus Invitational, and Season 1 is in the book. So we got some players headed to the Players' Championship, and you can learn about how all 4 headed that way right now. Season 1 of the SCG Tour concluded with the Invitational in Columbus, Ohio, where 4 players punched their ticket to the 2016 Players' Championship. On top of the Invitational champion, 3 Season 1 points leaders locked up their spots in the year-end tournament. Jeff Hoagland started 2016 in 3rd place in the Season 1 points race, but quickly took the lead position after his runner-up finish at the Modern Open in Cincinnati to kick off the year. Hoagland added to his lead with a 2nd straight Modern Open top 8 in Charlotte, and he never looked back. He put together top 16 and top 32 finishes at the Atlanta and Columbus Opens before making top 8 of his regionals and the Louisville Open. Hoagland wrote out a solid end of Season 1 and had his Players' Championship spot virtually locked entering the Columbus Invitational. For Joe Lissette, Andrew Tenjum, and Jerry Thompson, their invitational performances would decide which 2 would make the Players' Championship. Lissette and Tenjum held the lead going into the event, but with the most successful player in invitational history lurking, neither player could possibly feel safe. After day 1, Tenjum and Thompson sat at 7-1, while Lissette was losing ground at 5-3. Lissette would fail to win a match on day 2, as Thompson rallied to a top 8 finish and Tenjum made the top 32, leaving the Miracle Man on the outside looking in. Come Sunday, a top 8 field headlined by Thompson in his 7th Sunday appearance was set to decide a champion. Max McVety started the quarterfinals by using mono-white humans to defeat Jameson Purdue in his blue-red control deck, while Andrew Main piloted green-white tokens past James Wager and Big White in 5 games. On the other side of the bracket, Ryan Fleischer's Bant Company swept Jerry Thompson's white-blue humans, while Craig Krempels upsetted the top-seeded Logan Mize in a Bant Company mirror. McVety continued to beat down in the semifinals, eliminating Main in 5, setting up a finals matchup against Krempels, who came out on top of a second marathon Bant Company mirror.
But in the end, the SCG Live commentator couldn't stop the human onslaught, as Max McVety swept the finals to win $10,000, an invite to the Players' Championship, and his very own custom clue token. StarCityGames.com congratulates Max McVety, Jeff Hoagland, Jerry Thompson, and Andrew Tenjum for their impressive play this season. 11 spots remain for the 2016 Players' Championship. Who will claim them? Stay tuned to SCG Live and the SCG Tour to keep up with all the action.
Well, Max won then, but can he win right now in game number 3 against Tom Genzman? Tough matchup for him, no matter how you slice it. I know he got the job done in game 1, even when he was on the draw to break serve, but this is not easy for him.
Genzman gave him a lot of turns game 1 and didn't have a counter spell. That's just not going to happen very often.
Both players are going to take a look at the openers here. Again, Max is on the play. And it's just got to be a quick start. And that's just how the deck works. It's got to ramp on 2, maybe suspend a Search Tomorrow on 1 and cast it through the breach on turn 4 or turn 5. That's kind of the game plan here. And hope his opponent doesn't have too much interaction. All right, green light. Valakut is where Max will start. Over to Genzman. There's a basic forest, and there's a Glistener Elf. So an infect creature right away. Over to McVety we go now. Pia and Kieran Nalar in the main deck this weekend. 2 of those. That's actually pretty good against infect.
I mean, people talk about Lingering Souls a lot being good against this deck. And
yeah.
If you're able to get to it on the 3rd turn, which you can do fairly easily with Farseek or Search for Tomorrow on time, that's a lot of blocking.
Yep. And I would be surprised if that's a card that Genzman is prepared for, let's say, from a deck like this.
Not only is it a lot of blocking, but even against Blight Agent, if you get to untap, suddenly you have a lot of onboard shocks.
Secure Tribe Elder. Good blocker right now as well. So now we're going to go Genzman's way. This game could be a little bit interesting here. Now we know just how powerful Infect can be. It can work its way through a lot of different things. We've seen Tom Ross do that quite a bit on the SCG Tour over the years. See if Genzman can do the same.
And this Secure Tribe Elder is really bad news for Genzman, because if Genzman makes an attack, McVety can block. If Genzman passes, McVety can say, I also pass, let's just trade. If Genzman uses a pump spell that doesn't give trample, then McVety can easily sacrifice it and get the land and trade with a pump spell.
Yeah, Noble Hierarch. Now this might be the best of all the worlds, right?
Right, this advances Genzman's board, and it forces McVety to sacrifice the Tribe Elder without getting an additional card out of it. However, this does expose him to Anger the Gods in a big way.
That's also true. So McVety will block with the Secure Tribe Elder. He'll sacrifice that, search up White Bordered Mountain.
I think he's got all 3 art pieces.
I think he does
I
too.
think confirmed all 3 art pieces.
What set are those from?
Revised.
Revised, all right. We have to have a talk, I think, post-round. He's young. I get it. He doesn't understand what kind of rule he's breaking with this, but it's fine. Here's Pia and Kieran Nalar. Thopter's on the way. No clue tokens for Max. But 2 Thopters are pretty brutal. And this card is so good against Infect. We've seen this card, from Jerry Thompson, Todd Anderson, stuff like that. When they play Grixis, Michael Majors, be very, very good against Infect. Again, if you get to untap with this thing, which is so likely, I think, in this game, it's really, really hard for Genzman to win.
And Genzman doesn't interact with this very well at all. He has Spell Pierces. He's got Dispels. His anti-creature measures are Dismembers. Yeah. This is just not an easy card for him to handle.
And I'd be shocked if he even has Dismember in the deck after sideboard. Right? Yep. There's not really a... I know that it killed Primeval Titan in game 1, but there's not really much of a reason to have it. Not a lot of targets, so...
It required 2, and then he still just died the next turn.
Yep.
So I'm guessing they're not in the deck.
What Tom needs now is something like a Blighted Agent, or perhaps he needed it last turn. I think he's in some real trouble at this stage. But again, Infect does get a little bit crafty. They can work their way through some weird situations. He's going to start things off with the Noble Hierarch.
That's not shabby. Now at least you have a 3/3 attacker. Not easy for Genzman to block that. I mean, the alternative line that McVety has now is simply to chump block the 1 Exalted Threat every single turn and give himself the time and breathing space to set up Primeval Titan. If his hand allows him to do that, it's pretty easy. If he's really banking on this Pia and Kieran Nalar controlling the battlefield for a very long time, he may just have to take this hit, untap, and then make things complicated for Genzman next turn.
McVety's going to decide how he wants to block here. Again, remember, 2 Exalted triggers, so Glistener Elf is a 3/3. And as you mentioned, is it a chump blocking thing? Maybe it's a put all my creatures in front of it thing, but that's always risky when you're playing against a deck that has so many pump spells.
It depends on the specifics of McVety's hand. Basically, my feeling is if his hand's excellent, if he's got a very good path to win the game inside of the next 2 or 3 turns, just chump block every single turn. If that's not the case, then you've got to consider taking this hit, then untapping and having a lot of mana plus P and Kieran and a bunch of Thopters and complicating things that way.
Well, how do you feel about that block? Actually just blocking with P and Kieran as opposed to a Thopter there.
Well, if he's going to chump block with anything, I'd rather it be P and Kira, because if he's chump blocking, it probably already means his hand is good, and I wanted the ability to chump block the Nexuses if Genzman turns around and starts attacking with those instead.
Okay.
So this, to me, indicates that McVety has a very strong hand if he's making this line of play.
Well, with the way he's moving, it sure seems that way. He's going to sacrifice the Wooded Foothills very, very quickly. We could see it through the breach here right away. Note, right now for Genzman, he's got 2 Inkmoth Nexus on the battlefield that are untapped, and that Noble Hierarch that's untapped is actually summoning 6. So blue mana not a concern, which means Spell Pierce, Dispel, whatever. Not a concern on this turn as McVety searches up a Cinderglade.
Your point's well taken, though. Why chump block with P and Kira there? Isn't a Thopter better? Well, if your hand's really good, all you want to make sure is that you can block as much as possible, and the Thopters are more reliable blockers.
Here is through the breach. There is no way for Genzman to stop this right now. Again, no access to blue mana. There's Primeval Titan. That's what this deck is all about right now. It's not Scape Shift. It's not Prismatic Omen. It's about Primeval Titan and Valakut. So Valakut is going to get searched up. We might see him get a second one here, and he will. Now remember, that Primeval Titan does have haste. So we could see Genzman lose most of his board this turn.
I think Genzman might simply die this turn.
Yeah.
Because the Primeval Titan attack is worth, from Valakut triggers, is worth 18 damage.
18? 12, I think. We get two mountains, so that's 4 triggers. Oh, there's 3
Valakuts.
Oh, ignore me, there's 3. You're right. Yep.
So that's 8. So that's, you're at 2, and there's a 6/6 Trampler attacking.
There's a Trampler, yeah. That's true. It's 2 Stomping Grounds. So there are 3 Valakuts on the battlefield, so that is 18. You are correct, my friend. We'll see where these triggers are going to go, but I think I just saw that point. I don't care about your creatures. I'm going upstairs to you.
And you can see why the deck has moved to Through the Breach. You know, there's arguments for and against Scape Shift, but McVety was able to do this on 5 mana. Most of your Scape Shift kills involve much more mana than that, and if you're playing around things, it gets even more complicated. But McVety, very early on in the game, just able to set this up. Something you can't do with Scape Shift.
Well, I think this is smart deck building. With what they've done with this deck.
The flip side of it is sometimes you have a Through the Breach in your hand and no creature.
Yes.
And that could be a Scape Shift that can win the game sometimes. Yep. So it's not free, but you see that the draws are a lot more explosive when you have the right Through the Breach draw.
Oh, there's some very real trade-offs here. As you mentioned, with Through the Breach, your deck is a lot more explosive. You can kill your opponent maybe on turn 4, what have you, depending on how the draws line up. It makes for a much different deck, and I think one spot where Max is going to get maybe a little bit of equity is the fact that people don't really know what's in his deck. So people might board in, I don't know, envelop-esque effects, more counter magic, and that's just not what it's about at all. There are no Scape Shifts here. There are no Prismatic Omens, so if people are bringing in Destructive Revelries or Naturalize effects, that's nonsense as well. It's very interesting. Is that a Pulse of Marasa?
I believe that's a
I think this is your favorite. This is your favorite interaction with Pulse of Marasa.
Yep.
So, I'll let you go over this since you learned this the hard way on Magic Online once.
All right, so Pulse of Marasa can target out of either graveyard.
Yes, it can.
But there has to be a target.
Absolutely.
But you gain the life no matter who you target.
Which is very easy to understand. So
right, that's the type of complexity baggage I want on a common.
So what Tom is doing here is he says, return target creature or land card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. So Max, you get something back, and I get 6 life, not you. Also, instant speed.
But now you can see why McVety was paid off for the way that he blocked with P and Kieran Alar. In this spot, where he's probably going to win the game if he just has a mountain next turn, he's much safer having the 2 flyers in play than if he had P and Kieran Alar and 1 flyer in play.
Yeah.
Because there's 2 copies of Nexus. Who knows? Maybe there's a way for him to punch through on 1 unblocked creature.
With how Infect plays, they can kill you out of nowhere.
Bunch of the right mixture of Mini-Genic Growth and Become Immenses, he could do it even on this board. So it was a subtle thing last turn, but assuming that McVety still has the kill rolled up next turn just by playing all land, that block with P and Kieran Alar last turn looks even more sharp.
So Genzman We'll play a third Ink Month Nexus. Here comes Glistener Elf. I think we're going to see a block here. Pretty quick one there from Max. And remember, Tom actually gave Max back P and Kieran. So he can actually just play that and then throw a Thopter at Tom. Now, maybe Max is a little bit concerned about another counterspell, maybe another Pulse of Marasa, what have you. But just laying out the options.
2 rounds in, and we've already seen Pulse of Marasa on an opposing card.
Yeah. Welcome to Modern, I think. Max trying to come to a decision on what he wants to do this turn. Tapping 2 red mana. Let's see what this is going to be. A Spell Skite. Okay. That's a nice insurance policy, that's for sure. Now here's Pia and Kieran. That's going to resolve, it appears. So 2 Thopters on the way.
I think we're likely to see McVety pass the turn and then try to go for the kill in the upkeep.
Sure.
You've seen Pulse of Marasa, so you don't want to do it right now. If he's got some sort of weird trick to survive, at least make him spend the mana on his own turn.
And this is all... So you might be thinking, why doesn't Max just kill him? Because something weird could happen.
Yes.
You know, that's the thing. Like, you don't know what your opponent has, so it's better to just play it safe, because it's very easy to just say, I'm just going to play my P and Kieran, throw a Thopter at you, and then, 90% of the time you're dead. Well, you can play around that 10% in this instance.
Yep. And if Genzman has something like Rancor, it's not even inconceivable he could play over the top of your blockers in play.
Yeah.
So you just err on the side of caution here.
There's no reason not to be careful. He's in a great spot as the Columbus Invitational champion, but he's not getting ahead of himself, which is what the best players in Magic do. There's a Dryad Arbor.
And McVety's got a lot of protection with Spellskite in play as well. So no reason to take any risks here. He's got a commanding position. He can try to kill Genzman this turn. If he fails to do so, he can untap and probably kill him next turn. Plus, if he draws a mountain...
That's also game.
Right.
Yeah.
So just err on the side of caution here.
It's those games that are, 98% in your favor, and you just don't want the 2% to come in.
Yep.
That's all it is. Doesn't matter what it looks like. This is just what it is. You just don't want to lose a game like this to something completely absurd. You don't even know what that absurd card's going to be. You just don't want to lose a game to that. Here come the creatures. Now might be a safe time to throw something. I think Max is going to very smartly make his blocks first.
Yeah, might as well block first.
Yeah.
Because if Genzman wants to pass, McVety can also just pass.
Yes.
He doesn't have to do anything.
So now he's going to throw a Thopter upstairs, and that is going to do it. Max McVety is going to win this match here over Tom Genzman, 2-1. Red-Green Valakut will take care of Infect. And for our Columbus Invitational champion, who's got his own clue token being unveiled this weekend that everyone here got, he's got $10,000 extra dollars from winning the Invitational a couple weeks ago, going to Pro Tour Eldritch Moon, going to Players Championship. He's also got a second victory on the day. He starts off here in Indianapolis 2-0.